to start off, I wanted to start with you have lived through some of the most transformative times in the history of in human history. How do you assess the transition from the 1950s to say the current era in terms of purely environmental, looking it through the environmental looking glass?
Well, you know, the range of the tiger has decreased by 90% in the last 200 years. And a lot of it used to be in 24 countries. Now it's in about 13 countries and very rare in some of these. So it's very difficult to protect the tiger for various reasons. One is the human population growth, destruction of habitat, and the killing of tigers. Because as you know, if you kill off the tiger's prey, they like to eat livestock. And local people naturally resent that and kill the tigers. In addition, there's a serious, serious problem in that tiger parts, everything from skin to bones, are used for traditional medicine in China. And so there was a huge export of tiger parts to China that continues to much lesser extent because it's illegal now. But a local person, a poor farmer who's poor, and he kills a tiger at that time, he can make good money from it, selling it to the right dealers. So the tiger had lots and lots of problems.
So, George, I wanted to ask you about now coming down to the conservation story in India. Over the past decades that you've worked in India as well, in the 60s, India has transformed from a country, being the most populous country in the world with the largest population now. There's a whole lot of development going on. India has a lot of aspirations of becoming a developed country. How do you manage this whole debate between environmental conservation and economic progress?
Well, you're right. But India has more tigers than any other country because it has made an effort to protect them. And so now I think it has some 40 little reserves. And thanks to Indira Gandhi, who was the leader for quite a while, she banned the export of tiger skins. She banned the export, uh, I mean, hunting, because, to kill a tiger gave you status symbol. So some of these, particularly Maharajas, they competed to kill the most possible. And there are two of them. Udaipur is one, and I can't remember the other, that killed 1,000 or more tigers. And that gave him status. But luckily, thanks to Indira Gandhi and later leaders, that was cut out. But even so, killing continued. For example, in 1993, several hundred pounds of tiger bones were confiscated in Delhi. And as a result, India banned the export of tiger bones to China. And it's very hard to stop because locals can make money from it. Of course, India has gained from tourism. People pay good money to go and see a tiger in the wild. And I know I worked in Kanha Park in Madhya Pradesh in the early 70s, and it's a wonderful place for tigers. And I've revisited it 3 or 4 times, the last time early this century. And India's done a marvelous job of protecting the tigers there. And you can see them readily. And Uh, the important thing is, however, that the fees paid by tourists, a good percentage must go to the local people. If it does not, they're not going to be interested in protecting them. What has impressed me is that India has stimulated so many Indians to get seriously involved in tiger conservation. There's, for example, Ulas Kurant, who is by far the most knowledgeable about tigers anywhere. And there are others, Balmik Tapar and so forth, that have been speaking on behalf of tigers, and that has a tremendous impact locally.
Yes. So I will now come to your work at Kanha in the 60s when you spent 14 months out here studying the tigers and the other large mammals. But before I come to your work at Kanha, there's one interesting aspect that I discovered was in one of the books you mentioned that you played a pivotal role in inspiring Mrs. Gandhi for protecting the tigers. In 1969 there was an IUCN conference in Delhi where you had presented a paper with Neil Simon about endangered mammals in South Asia, and that was a very it's a very supposed to be a very important moment when the whole conversations around conservation and protection started. So if you can, do you recall that 1969 event in Delhi and any of those interactions you had?
Yes, but the thing is, I work for what was the New York Zoological Society and then the Wildlife Conservation Society. And to be blunt, you have to raise funds to do the work. And I did not want to be in academia. I wanted to do field work and help animals and countries by helping to set up protected areas and so forth. So by studying a tiger or a lion or any big charismatic animal means you're more likely to get a grant than if you asked to study earthworms. And so I was very lucky because India was very generous. In Kana, they let us stay in the bungalow. And I was particularly fortunate that I have a wife who was very adaptable.
Yes, I know.
Here,
Yeah.
here are my two little kids in Kana Park. And that's very good because you worry about little kids and disease and so forth. But they did very well. And my wife and we moved to various countries, Tanzania, Pakistan, and my wife taught in school. And today they're both professors at universities. So I was very, very fortunate in having my wife, Kay.
Yeah, so there's a place at Kana Tiger Reserve called a Scholar's Hide. It's named on you. It's called your
Oh,
hide.
oh, yeah.
So there is a legend that goes that you used to observe all the animals from there. It's near the meadows, but the project director, the field director of the thing, was saying that it's not true. It's not. He was staying in a bungalow, and it was not. So if you can dispel some of that notions about the Scholar's Hide that we have.
Oh, well, I'm honored that they did that, but I have to move to where the tigers are, and they're not necessarily near that place. And so I put up either a tent where they made a kill, or I climbed a tree and sat on the branch and watched them all night. And that was wonderful because I got insights into tiger behavior uh, that I wouldn't have had otherwise. For example, uh, tigers are thought to be solitary and not social, but they're very social. But they live alone, but they scent mark trees, they scratch trees, they leave their scent, they recognize each other's roar, so they remain in contact. And when they meet, they rub cheeks and are very friendly and share a kill. So what it means is all the tigers in an area know each other and often are related that there may be grown cubs from a female that lives there. So the tigers are much more social than it was realized before.
Wonderful. Yes, and I just want in your book, The Deer and the Tiger, you give very detailed descriptions about, as you said, the sitting on the kill of a tiger, spending the whole night overlooking a branch. How did you manage these, very interesting observations that were there? Were you not, from a human point of view, were you not getting tired? Were you not, exhausted by all these things? And how were you making these copious notes all the time?
Well, the fact is, any animal, large animal, once it knows you by smell and sight, and it sees that you're not a threat, they start accepting you. So I could sit near them. If I meet them on the trail, I don't stare at them. I back off slowly. Don't run because that invites pursuit. And so if you treat them right, they basically accept you. Sure, there are man killers that get in a bad habit, but not where I was working.
Yes. And in your time, what would you say was so unique about Kana? Because before you selected Kana as your location for study, you had also explored other options in India. What was so
Well,
unique about Kana that brought you here?
number one, I visited various areas and I saw that Kana was well protected, that visibility was quite good so you could observe the tigers readily, and the local government officials were not adverse to have a stray American come and watch their animals. And they provided a bungalow where family and I could live. And so it was a perfect situation.
Wonderful. And at Kana, and like the book that you talk about, the deer and I, there's also this species, the hard ground swamp deer, the Bara Singa, which Kanha is very famous for. And now it has come back from the brink of extinction in that sense. So, if you can talk about the Bara Singa also, that would be very interesting.
Well, the thing is, Kana was wonderful in that they had a whole number of,
Yes.
they had the access to cheetal deer, they had gaur, they had, as you mentioned, the Bara Singa, they had sambar deer, and they all interacted. They're a community. Sure, the tiger eats them, the leopard eats them, but that's what nature is like. And so it gave me a wonderful opportunity to study a natural system that hadn't been seriously impacted this by humans and animals shot out and so forth. So that made it a wonderful place to study, plus very good cooperation from the local government departments.
Yes. And what do you feel about at Kana? Kana is also one of the first places in India where they did this whole project about relocating villages from the park to the outsides, and which has kind of shown positive results. What do you feel about this whole argument about local communities and saving, protecting wildlife? Whether do we need to go think about these fortress ideas of protection or conservation? In that sense, we need to have maintain these pristine areas, or is it somewhere else that we should be working on?
This is a very difficult question for governments to decide. They can, some areas in the country should be for the rest of the population and for humankind. and protect them for the future so they can enjoy and see nature. If you destroy everything, uh, humans will do so. And so it's a tough decision for governments to move a community. But if they're compensated well enough and given good land, uh, then it helps the country and the world in the long term.
Okay, so I have one more question to you, George. Your books, be it The Deer and the Tiger, or The Last Panda, or The Serengeti Lions, they are very detailed accounts and studies, but they are also very inclusive in the sense they have a lot of people are able to read and kind of empathize with the animals and things. How important do you think for a biologist is it to reach out to this wider audience and also engage them on topics related to conservation?
Well, there are two things. One is the scientific monographs, which leave to the future the detail, and other scientists can build on it. And this is why the work of Ullas Kurant and others in India is so important, because they've continued asking new questions, found new uh, results that need to be implemented, and so forth. But in addition, it's valuable to write popular accounts to reach the average public because they don't read those scientific things.
Wonderful. Okay, now if I just quickly ask you, you have studied the mountain gorillas, you have studied the panda, you have studied the lions and the tigers and the deer as well, the capybara, the jaguars in Brazil, and so long other. If I were to ask you, this whole diverse set of usually a person kind of studies one. How did were you able to manage such a diversity in your studies?
Well, you can always say I have a short attention span. Uh, in that, after I have got some basic information and then particularly stimulated local biologists to take over, I find some other country where I might have the same result. So, as you can see, the tiger studies in India have continued for the last decades. In Tanzania, the lion studies have continued for many, many years. And uh, the same with giant pandas. There are now Chinese scientists doing excellent work on studying giant pandas. So uh, I'm not needed. I go look for places where I can stimulate new research and conservation.
Yes. Okay. Now I want to ask you, much has changed in the field biology, from the times when you used to pick up tiger's cat and bring it back home to analyze what the tiger had eaten or possibly, sniff around on trees for the urine of the tiger when it was spraying to the times right now in terms of, you have DNA sequencing and satellite monitoring. What is the role of the field biologist in the 21st century going to be like?
Well, today you need more detail. They, for example, with uh, radio collars, satellite collars, you can get detail on the daily movement, the weekly movement, monthly movement. You learn details about animals that you can't readily get otherwise. So there's much new information, and I try to read about that and delight that there is this continuous work on the species.
Yes. And in these tough times of climate change, global warming, and accelerated extinction of species, are you still hopeful about the future?
Good question. Global warming is a reality. Countries are not doing enough to reduce it. So it's going to get more and more difficult. So countries have to find ways of adapting to changes. If you want to save the tiger, all right, some forest areas are going to disappear. So you can plant forest corridors so they can move to another forest area and so forth. And well, right now it's estimated there are around 4,000 tigers left in the wild, most of them in India. They used to be in 24 countries. Now they're in about 14 countries. But what to do? Uh, there are 5 times as many tigers in captivity as in the wild, in zoos and menageries. But you can't release them because they don't know how to hunt. And so you've got all these issues that you need to consider, and then no easy solutions.
George, one more thing I'll just talk is when I was talking to some of the experts here in course of the thing, one of the things that they said was one of the methodology that you adopted for the studies of the tiger, say like buffalo baiting and all, could have changed the behavior patterns of the tiger, and also some of the things were outdated. So do you think we need to go back and do a detailed, we need to keep updating ourselves on behavioral patterns, and do they change over a course of a time in terms of wildlife and animals?
Well, in general, if you want to protect a species or a habitat, there is no final solution. You can never, ever turn your back. You have to have people monitoring the situation continually. Otherwise, suddenly area is invaded by a corporation or by local people, and you lose what you fought for over years. So this makes conservation very difficult.
What is it that fascinates you about the tiger amongst all the other big cats that you've studied?
I enjoy of being outdoors and wandering around. I enjoy the isolation from human crowds and to sit near an animal and it accepts you and just sit there and take notes on what it does and so forth. And uh, it gives me peace and tremendous satisfaction. It's not stressful. So that's why I used to go out and sleep near a tiger on its kill, or I sleep near the family of snow leopards. And when they saw I was not dangerous, they accepted it. And so I got insights into their lives, which pleased me.
Your description about tigers per se, you have also described them to be very beautiful and majestic, when they are there, in terms of the way they carry themselves and the way they behave, and those kind of things. So that has also been a very interesting thing, because we always look to the tiger from the from a prism of fear, and as the images of Jim Corbett's man eaters of Kumau and all these have kind of thing. But for the first time we looked at tigers from a very different perspective from your books.
I found the tiger particularly appealing because I could recognize individuals so easily by the stripe pattern on their face and so forth. So when I meet a tiger and look in its face, it's meeting like an old friend. And so it gives me information, and also to have tigers in the wilderness not afraid of you is wonderful.
Finally, your message to the younger generation, say a whole set of Indians on on conservation, and to the world at large in that sense.
Well, sure, governments have a problem. One is how to spend the money the best way for the country, and they never have enough money. So you have to set priorities and carry through. Uh, I sympathize with their problems, but also I know the amount of not just corruption, but misspending of funds uh, without a result is widespread in countries. And so that has to be curtailed and decisions made about what is most important for the country. The thing to remember is if we destroy the environment, we destroy ourselves.